All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the Design Review Board meeting, commencement of the meeting for May 8, 2025. Mr. Rodriguez, sitting to my right, would you lead us in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball. A lot of baseball. Little league. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, welcome, everybody. Oh, yes. Sarah, please call the roll.
Board Member Coveney.
Here.
Board Member Weil.
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon. Here. And Chair Gibbs.
Here.
And
Oh,
note,
And Board Member Bauta is absent.
all righty. So I'll start the meeting today by describing our procedure, and we will begin tonight with public communications, in which any member of the public can address the board on any items that are not agendized but are within the purview of the Design Review Board. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. We will then go to the consent calendar, which I believe we have no items on, so we'll skip that. Then we will address a modification, if any, in the order of the agenda items, and then we will proceed with the regular order of business. For each item, I will introduce the item, the address, the design review number. The applicants will take their seats at the front desk. The board will then provide ex parte disclosures. Next, the staff will present summary presentation and comments, at which time the board will have the opportunity to ask any questions of staff. Then the public hearing will be declared open. It will begin with the applicant team having 5 minutes to present the project. After that, the members of the public will have an opportunity to speak. Each will have 3 minutes unless, in the board's discretion, that amount of time is reduced. The applicant, at the conclusion of the public members having the opportunity to speak, the applicant will then have 3 minutes for rebuttal. Next, the board will have the opportunity at that time to ask the applicant questions, as well as staff again. After the questions, the public hearing will be closed and the board will enter into discussions. And then if any actions to be taken, the board will do that action by motion, second, and then any discussion on the motion, and then vote. With respect to the staff reports, if any person residing with 300 feet, after the decision of the board, the applicant or members of the public will have an opportunity to appeal, and that's a decision on the application. And any person residing with 300 feet of the project who disagrees with the board action will have 14 days to appeal. So with that, I will begin tonight with the public communications. So this is the time any member of the public can address us on a matter not agendized but are within our purview. Is there any member wishing to do that? Seeing no member come up to the podium, and there being no consent item, we will start with, any desire on the board to modify the order?
no.
Okay. We'll start with the first item, which is item 5.1, 1712 Thurston Drive, Design Review 23-1020. Board Member Gannon's suggested expedition or an expedited review. I concur. Unless there's an objection, why don't we proceed on that basis? So, Mr. Latham.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. So item 5.1 is for the project at 1712 Thurston Drive. It's located here in the Temple Hills neighborhood. The proposed project involves the retaining walls, landscaping, which was modified, modifying a previously approved landscape plan, as well as the associated grading. This was a code enforcement as it was constructed without permits. And so staff is recommending approval.
Any questions of the board members? Pardon me? Oh, I forgot the ex parte. I'll get the hang of this. But why don't we do ex parte? Go ahead.
Chair visited the site and met with Steve Coratani.
I had a site visit with Steve Coratani.
And I went to the site and spoke with Steve Cartani.
I did a site visit with Steve Cortani. Okay, now, any questions of staff? Mr. Cortani, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. Good evening, board members. Good evening, staff. And Pat, welcome to the fold. Happy. As Mr. Gibbs said, my name is Steve Kawaratani, but you can call me Mr. Kawaratani if you wish. So this project is in code enforcement. And the actual applicant, well, I guess I'm the applicant, but the property owner is the third property owner since I took over the project. So Mr. Grayelli is an innocent party. So no dispersions or aspersions back to him. So this is a simple request. The prior owner wasn't aware that after this house was approved in 2008, that she would have to get permission to plant 3 palm trees, some fruit trees, have access for the gardener, and put in some pathways and the retaining walls that Daniel mentioned. And so being naive doesn't get you off the hook, as we know. So we're here this evening to request approval for a modification to the previously approved landscape plan. And again, that's going to consist of walkways, battered walls, less than 5 feet tall, grading less than 40 cubic yards, fruit trees, and the 3 palm trees. And can we go to my next slide, please? So viewed from the top by the spa, you can see where the fruit trees are at the bottom. And then looking to the northeast, you can see the 3 palm trees. It's probably going to surprise the board and staff that this project ended up here due to a neighbor dispute. I know it's shocking, but it does happen, and we're here to clean this up and get the project approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cortani. Now, any members of the public wish to speak, please come up to the podium. Seeing no one, we return to you, Mr. Cortani. You have 3 minutes if you desire to use them.
Let's be brief today.
Okay, any questions of the board?
Just one of staff. Did we receive any letters of correspondence or complaints?
None.
I have no questions. We will close the public hearing and proceed to deliberations. Who would like to begin?
I just find this easily approvable. It has no view impact, no privacy impact, no concerns for access or any harm to the public. No neighbors complained or at least reached out to the city in complaint. So there doesn't appear to be any egregious attempt here to overbuild or overplant in this case. So I can get behind the project.
And I have nothing further to add.
Mr. Weil?
Yeah, I find the project consistent with the design review criteria. It's really modest. It improves the access, potentially fire safety access as well. So all in all, the improvements are positive for the area and for the site. So I'm fully supportive of the project this evening.
Okay, generally, we don't like to see unpermitted work. The standard, so everyone knows for the board, is would we have approved it in this form had it been presented to us prior to it being built? And I concur with my colleagues, this easily meets that standard meets all guidelines, has no impact on neighbors, and I would approve the project. So do we have a motion?
Chair, I'll move item number 5.1 at project location 1712 Thurston Drive. That the board, wait, the thing moved around. That will adopt the resolution 23-1020, attachment 1, approving design review 23-1020 for modifications to an approved landscape plan, including retaining walls, grading that have been constructed in the R1 low density zone. Findings that action exempt from CEQA section 15301, and it meets the design review criteria.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Call the roll, please.
Board Member Coveney,
Yes.
Board Member Weil,
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon,
Yes.
Chair Gibbs.
Yes. All right, congratulations. I'm now going to call item 5.2, 152 High Drive, Design Review 25-0344. And I see the applicant is at the table. Shall we do ex parte? Go ahead, MJ.
Yes, I went by the property. I spoke with the homeowner and Lance Polster, and I also spoke with Steve Coratani.
Same.
I also did a site visit with Steve Coratani, and I met with Inez Frazier and Lance Polster.
Okay, I did a site visit with Steve Cortani, met with the applicants, the owner. I also met with Inez Frazier and with Lance. So with that, staff, can you please make the presentation, Mr. Latham?
Yes.
While Daniel's pulling that up, I'll go ahead and let you know, Mr. John Tilton is project planner on this. He retired and he's no longer with the city as of last week. And so Daniel graciously agreed to step in his place and give the presentation today. So appreciate that. But I just want to let you know, John Tilton no longer employed with the city. He retired.
For a second time, right?
Retired for a second time, yes.
Sorry, I'm having a Zoom issue. Sarah, do you think you could pull it up for me? All right, so item 5.2 is for a project at 152 High Drive. The project site is located right over here near downtown on High Drive. Next slide. The project involves code enforcement activity regarding these decks, which are outlined in red here. Next. And then here's some photos of the decks. Staff received some public correspondence on this since the notice was sent out. And I believe the applicant and the neighbor came to an agreement, and we'll see their presentation next. Staff is ultimately recommending approval per the next slide. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Coratani, I hope what Mr. Latham said is correct. You got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Could I have my slides up, please?
Yes. So it's under applicant presentation. And that. Okay.
Don't start the clock, Sarah. Well, just as an aside, Lance and I first met when we were 25 years old. He had a lot more hair back then, and I was better tempered. for sure.
And I was in elementary school for the record.
So we've known each other a long time. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'll start my presentation. Steve Kuartani here, and I have colored in the area for clarity for the board. And before I begin my remarks, I want to thank Lance, and I want to thank Tom and Lewis for encouraging us to try to sort out the issues we've been having on this project. Again, this is another code enforcement project, and I'm sure the board knows that if an applicant and neighbor communicate, chances are you're going to have better results. So I'm thanking Lance here now, and I hope he doesn't go off the script that we have completed. So we have the larger deck, and we have a smaller platform, and we have that stairway coming up. That stairway has become an issue for both Inez and for Lance. And when I had my first meeting with Chair Gibbs, he suggested that if you look at those green circles that are up at the top on the property line, he suggested that perhaps we would consider filling in more vegetation to provide a little more privacy for the neighboring property and for her tenant. Can we go to the next slide, Daniel? So Lance prepared this exhibit, and what he's proposing and what we have agreed to accept is that we would take the existing stairway and we would move it 4 feet away from the property line. And pardon me, 4 feet from the existing stairs and away from the property line. So I think that this is something that Lance and Inez can accept. Lance and I spoke a little bit earlier today, and I think that we're going to maintain the landscape plants that were shown on the prior slide, and that he and I will work to arrange them to provide a little more privacy. So I don't have a whole lot more to say about this. This does a couple things. It takes the stairway out of the side yard setback, as Lance pointed out to me. It gives us a slightly longer run on the stairway, so we'll be better able to set up the risers and treads for the stairway. So we have that additional benefit as well. And I'm just hoping that if the board accepts these conditions of approval, that we can move on, get our building permit, and put an end to the issue. Thank you.
Okay, now we turn to public comment. Please, I assume, Lance, you're going to take the podium, so you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Lance Polster, and I'm representing the neighbor next door, Inez Frazier, at 160 High Drive. Again, as Inez has said, and I reiterate, much appreciate all of this for something that probably may have been thought as kind of a simple situation, but I think in our presentation to you guys, you've seen that this is kind of a bigger, longer process deal. We just wanted to kind of have that in your knowledge, so to speak. It's been a long slog, about 6 years of this going on. Steve has mentioned we're in agreement. The deck intrusion into the neighbor's privacy, our Inez's privacy, moving that so that we have a little bit of a triangular landing area moving away that was right next door to her property and the stairs, I think is very important as far as visual proximity to her tenants right there along the property line there. I think the stairs needing to be rebuilt anyway was a no-brainer, so that if you're going to rebuild them, why not move them to a better location? As Steve has said, it's probably going to be a better design as far as working out code. At any rate, I think that'll help alleviate the proximity issue. We just want to add on one thing. Steve might not have mentioned, but it's on the plans that we want to keep the height of anything further from that point of moving the stair to only 6.5 feet high. And I think we were in agreement on that. Just want to remind you that part of this is all about section number 2550 OOC, elevated decks not really allowed in a side yard if they're closer to 3 feet away from the property line. So I'm trying to alleviate that problem as well, at least in this section. I know there's other sections that are being let go of, so to speak, or dismissed. As well, I think we do have a design guideline about decks on very steep slopes that we don't want to be up in the air. So all of that was part of what kind of promulgated a lot of this concern. Because again, as you've said, Tom, there's a need to look at this as if it never existed. So if it never existed, would you put it here? I think we tend to think that you would not locate your decks right up against a property line if you don't need to. That's the purpose of side yards kind of thing. So with all of the myriad of code enforcement issues that were dismissed, we just wanted to, make sure that this was, you understand that by dismissing them, they weren't exactly permitted either. So they still exist in there somewhere. It's up to the administration to do whatever if they don't do anything or whatever they do. The applicant did, remember, submit plans in an agreement that we would, handle all of those things. So again, thank you so much for everything you guys have done, and I appreciate Steve working on this with me, and thank you. Any questions or?
No questions. Thank
Okay,
you,
thank you,
Lance.
guys.
Appreciate it. All right. Any other members of the public? Mr. Cortani, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. If I'd known Lance needed more time, I would have yielded some of my first 5 minutes. But that being said, Lance is correct. I forgot to mention that any plantings that we install as we work in collaboration will not exceed 6.5 feet. We want to respect the sunlight that comes onto the property. So I have nothing further to add other than thanking Lance and Inez once again, and thanking the Design Review Board for encouraging us to reach an agreement. Thank you.
Questions from the board? Oh, I thought I didn't see you come up. I will allow you to speak. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Jonathan Lukoff, 238 Chiquita Street, Laguna Beach. Old friend of Sally's and know Steve well. I've met Lance before. I had some things to say, and I basically will say I totally support what they've come up with. When I looked at it, said to Sally, gee, these are steep stairs and it could be moved over a little, but it's here. Maybe, neighbors don't really own your view, but boy, this is a great solution and I totally support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume, Mr. Cortani, you don't have any rebuttal to that? All righty. At this point, any questions from the board?
Just for clarification, Steve, so that little triangle strip of the upper deck will be removed. Is that
It
correct?
will be.
Okay.
We're going to redraft that plan and we'll turn it into Jim and his staff this coming week.
Okay.
I have one more quick question. Sorry, I just realized. We had received a letter from one of the tenants about the lower deck and the lattice work. And I noticed that too when I was there. The lattice work seems like an afterthought, not a real attractive solution. Are you looking at putting some sort of more of a double-sided greenscape lattice there
Well, at this point, the former director, MJ, Mark Weiner, had cleared that trellis work or the lattice work. I've been in discussion with Lance regarding that, and he told me that he's going to seek a landscape solution on Inez's side. And if it provides enough privacy, we can certainly revisit that. But that's not part of the application this evening.
Do you mind if I?
Go ahead.
Just, in our.
Keep it brief, Lance.
Thank you. I'm sorry. In our discussion, when you move the stair, the last piece of trellis is the only issue that will need to be moved. And we'd love it not to go back up because we don't like the look of it. And maybe that's why we like the landscape solution. So just that last piece, if the applicant doesn't mind.
Okay, it doesn't sound like it's part of the application, and it's not going to be a condition tonight. So I have a couple questions. You showed two plans. Are those plans, is it your contemplation that we will make the plans part of the record and condition approval on those plans?
Right, with Lance's indulgence, we'll take his plan. However, we're going to redraft it. So the city has a clean copy, and I'll show it to Lance before we turn it in. And then the first slide I showed has the
Let's
plans
get
on
that
it.
slide up for obviously, I think we're going to be approving this, but we need to have clear conditions and not subject to future agreements. So if you could pull up the Lance Polster slide and tell me, we'll be conditioning approval on that being done as part of the application and the approved plan with whatever modifications to what I'm seeing. And for the record, it reads alternative design for 152 High Drive. Oh, go back, please. Dated May 8th, 2025. Any changes to this, or are you fine with it as shown?
No, I'm fine with it. You'll see that I struck out a couple of erroneous additions that were put there inadvertently, and that we are going to relocate the stairs 4 feet inward. And we're going to, as Board Member Weil asked, we're going to lose that portion of the landing, so the deck is straight. And if we go to the prior slide.
Yeah, let's go to that because I have a question about that too. Yeah, okay, so the landscaping that's being added to the application, be a condition of approval, are the green circles, which are listed as 5-gallon
Cape honeysuckle.
Cape honeysuckle to match existing and maintained at 6.5 feet.
That's correct. That number is figurative, Chair, because I'm not sure where we'll be able to put them in.
Well, the exact number, but the plan is to fill in to create a privacy screen with the next door neighbor's property.
That's correct.
Okay, I think it's clarified. Any other questions?
Yes, and was it future planting not to exceed 6 feet or 6.5 feet?
6 feet, 6 feet, 0.525.
It's right, it says 6.5.
He's being silly.
I know, but it says 6.5 feet. So why don't we say 6.5 feet? And with that, any more questions? I close the public hearing, deliberations. Who would like to begin?
Yeah, I can, just as Board Member Gibbs said in the last one, right, we've got to review this as it doesn't exist, right? It's part of a code enforcement. It was built without permits. And so what is a reasonable solution? And I think since the stair treads, since the handrails and stuff all needed to rebuild because those weren't to code, that relocating of the upper stair is probably appropriate. And I appreciate the willingness of the applicant and the neighbor to kind of work out that best fit solution. So I can support that moving the 4 feet. As far as the remainder part of the deck, as long as the handrails come up to code compliant, I am supportive of the proposal. It meets the design review criteria with the landscaping additions at 6.5 feet. It provides adequate privacy, and there's no significant views given the eucalyptus and Coast Highway that you're looking at in the other direction. So I'm supportive of the program.
Perfect. And I can echo what Board Member Weil said. I just like to say, in addition to it, it improves safety for the owner and for whoever visits that property. So thank you for working it out with you guys.
MJ?
Yeah, I concur with my board members on their particular criteria, specifically privacy, which seemed to be the most concerning. So thank you for working it out.
All right. Yeah, I concur with all the comments, and this solution is a fair and appropriate solution. And I appreciate Mr. Cortani, you reaching out. Lance, I appreciate you reaching out because you both were telling me you wanted to reach out. And it's just a matter of calmly, with common sense, coming up with a solution that works for everybody. So I applaud you guys. That's how the process is supposed to work. Okay, one more question with respect to the turning it over for a motion. Daniel, do you have both documents? Because the 152 High Drive document that's on the screen now will become part of the motion, I'm sure, as well as the document that I just referred to, the July 8, 2025 document that Lansford, May 8, I wrote July, May 8, 2025. Do you have both?
The May 8th that was shown on the screen.
Lance's May 8th.
Lance is,
Lance would have to give that to me.
okay. With that, do we have a motion?
I can do it.
I'll move item number 5. Got to press the green button. I'll move item number 5.2 at project location 152 High Drive, that the board adopts resolution 25034, attachment 1, approving design review 25-034 for elevated decks, guardrails, and stairs that have been constructed in the R2 zone, and finding said action exempt from California Qualities Act, CEQA pursuant section 15303. That the conditions that the crepe or the honeysuckle or the crepe honeysuckle plants be capped at 6.5 feet, and that it provides the adequate shielding and placements of the plants, and that the stairs, the uppermost stairs, be relocated 4 foot inward into the middle of the property, as explained in the attachments received May 8th, and that the handrails be code compliant.
I second that.
Call the roll.
Board Member Coveney?
Yes.
Board Member Weil?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon?
Yes.
Chair Gibbs?
Yes. All right. Congratulations again. Okay, the next item is 1550 Bluebird Canyon Drive, Lot A, Design Review 24-2586, Coastal Development Permit 24-2588, Revocable Encroachment Permit 24-2587. While the applicant gets ready, why don't we proceed with ex parte?
Chair, I had a site visit with Horst and Susan Witten. I also spoke with Steve Kawartani.
And I did the same.
I met with Peter and his wife, who are the neighbors across the street, Susan Witten, Nikki, who's the neighbor up the way. I just caught her in the driveway as she was coming home, and then Steve Kawartani and Horst. So,
All righty. I met with Steve and Horst at the site. I also spoke to Mr. Kawartani a few times. I met Peter Groman, Susan Witten, and William Horner. All right.
Chair, I spoke with William.
Okay. We do not have are you doing it?
Yeah, Chair Gibbs, Bill and I are going to tag team on this one. So I'll go ahead and start. First of all, this is item 5.3, 1550 Bluebird Canyon Drive, Lot A. First, I want to let everyone know that we've got some addressing issues. We have two new lots here. And in the past, we've referred to this as 1560 Bluebird Canyon Drive, Lot A, which is the original address for the project site. Just for the record, I want to make sure everyone knows that this address is 1550 Bluebird Canyon Drive. That address was assigned fairly recently. Apologize for that confusion. But again, this is a project by Mr. Janaeus for a single-family home, coastal development permit, design review, and a revocable encroachment permit. So project planner is Nancy Balmer-Sistra, and she is not here this evening. So Bill is going to go ahead and give you a showcase of the project, and then we'll have the applicant give their presentation. Okay?
Great. Thank you, Jim. And good evening, Chair Gibbs and board members. I'm Bill Rodriguez for the Community Development Department. As, oops, one moment. Not sure. Okay. All right. So the subject property is, Jim had indicated, is located at 1550 Bluebird Canyon Drive. It is about a 12,300 square foot lot. The applicant has submitted plans to develop a detached single-family house on the property. Entitlements that are required to realize that proposal included design review, coastal development permit, and a revocable encroachment permit from the city. The property is located kind of in a hillside area. We do have a few images to share with the board this evening from different vantage points showing the property in its context, kind of from a north, south, east, and west perspective. You can see the subject lot identified here with the downward facing or pointing arrows. And again, from a couple different perspectives, get a sense of the other homes that exist in the nearby neighborhood. And then the lot itself. So I don't have a outline of where the property line is located here, but you see the where the arrow is located. The property line located to the north is generally located where that single or lone tree is, kind of on the right-hand side of the image. Most of the development will be taking place, though, in the vicinity of where the arrow is located at. The house itself would consist of about 4,644 square feet in 2 stories with a subterranean 1,028 square foot 3-car tandem garage. There are entitlements that are required from the city, also include for grading, which will include about 1,900 cubic yards of export from the site. There will be retaining walls and landscaping as well as some improvements within the public right-of-way to include an approximate 12-foot high retaining wall to accommodate a public or an additional parking space adjacent to the public right-of-way. The development itself, actually, before I go on to the development itself, I got a couple of views here looking up and down Bluebird Canyon Road. The property itself does sit a few feet above the subject right-of-way, just beyond or to the left of the telephone pole, distribution pole that you can see there. The subject property will be developed with a 2-story, more contemporary style home. I'll let the architect get into some of those details in their presentation. But the property does or is proposed to be compliant with all of the city's development standards for the R1 zoning district. However, as part of the design review process, the board has the ability to look at things related to the structure itself, its location of vehicular access, any elevated decks that are on the site. The applicant also proposes some spas and water features as part of the property, in addition to the grading and landscaping that I had mentioned earlier. So in terms of the project itself, the house will look like this. We have images of the front elevation, which would face out towards Bluebird Canyon. The image in the lower right-hand corner is the rear or side elevation, which would look more down through sort of the canyon areas and out towards the Pacific Ocean. As part of the design review criteria, as the board members are very familiar, there are a number of standards that the city has. Some of them are listed here. They include concerns over access, the design articulation of the building itself, compliance with the city's general plan, issues pertaining to potential light and glare impacts of the development. Neighborhood compatibility is a significant issue, as well as privacy and view equity. In terms of reviewing the project against the coastal development permit standards, their criteria number 6 is one of the important ones that requires that the proposed development be found to be visually compatible with the character of the surrounding area, and that new development in particularly scenic areas are to be subordinate to the character of the setting. Relative to the project, staff has taken a neutral position on it this evening and is requesting some direction and feedback from the board as to any design direction that the board may have for the project in terms of being able to make findings required for design review compliance or the coastal development permit findings. So with that, I will conclude my remarks. I know we have the applicant team here who would like to make a presentation before you begin your deliberations. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Very good presentation. Any questions of staff?
One question to Bill.
Mr. Chair, sorry, if I may, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add one brief thing to that staff
Go ahead.
report, if that's okay. The city did receive some correspondence about commentary submitted by a resident that happens to be a planning commissioner. I did just want to briefly address that. City officials retain their First Amendment rights. They're free to petition other boards as well as the city council. That being said, any allegation that her comments were given undue deference or weight completely without merit. The drafting of the staff report went through the normal, impartial, and fair process. My office was similarly consulted, as is typical, and I can assure you no extra weight was given. And even though I don't need to likely say it, I would advise the board to weigh all evidence before it tonight in a fair and impartial manner, and no extra weight should be given to any public comment based on their role or lack of a role with the city in any official capacity. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I appreciate those comments. And Mr. Weil, you have a question?
Yeah. You concluded your comments with the staff had is a neutral, but there was more specifics to the design criteria. Which ones were specifically highlighted? I think it's in the front page that you'd like us to review.
So I think staff is looking for some feedback from the board relative to the building's location on the site, height of the building, its general orientation, perhaps the amount of grading that is proposed to occur, whether or not the positioning of the building on the site, sort of on the hillside itself, is acceptable, or maybe opportunities to set it into the property a little bit more, just overall compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. Or that's kind of some of the feedback and concerns that we're looking for from the board.
Chair Gibbs, additionally, we're looking for feedback on view equity and privacy. These are some of the issues and concerns that we've been hearing from the neighborhood. So I want to add that to the list as well.
Yeah, so it's clear, as I understand it, and from reading the staff report, the staff was giving us facts and information for us to consider, but has taken no position, including a position of denial on any of those criteria. Is that correct, Mr. Rodriguez?
It is.
All right, any other questions before we go to the applicant? Okay, not hearing any. Horst, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, excuse me, and city staff. I'm here, Horst Knoppenberger, the architect, Horst Architects, working with the property owner. I'm here with Michael Wilkes to my left, our landscape architect, and also Steve Kawaratani. Can we go to our presentation, please? We just have a few slides to go through. And maybe just to keep things going while we look for the presentation. So we started this project a couple of months ago, and as you may know, there was a previous design for this property that was fully staked and had gone through zoning. The first thing that we did in the office, along with the owners, we hosted a neighborhood meeting. It was a very productive neighborhood meeting. I think, for the most part, people will speak this evening. We learned a lot. At that neighborhood meeting, we learned that in order of magnitude, the issues are access, mass and scale, compatibility, privacy, and view equity, as Bill, very eloquently, laid out. So this is the front elevation of the project, but can we go to the next slide, please? So, in speaking with the neighbors, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at a site plan. And in red is the footprint of the previous project that was proposed, for the property. What I was hearing from the neighbors is that, the previous design looked very imposing, from Bluebird Canyon. So we pulled our new design back about an additional 15 feet from Bluebird Canyon to, minimize the appearance of mass and scale. We also, I've had, in addition to the neighborhood meetings, I've had a couple of very productive, creative meetings with Susan Witten, the adjacent property owner to the west, I guess the southwest. And, we saw an opportunity to actually pull the sort of westerly edge of the structure back an additional 5 feet. So we in doing these things, we reduced the floor area, the habitable floor area, from 5,200 to 4,600. And we also reduced the site coverage from 34% to 29%. Next slide, please. Okay. One of the main issues that we discussed with the neighbors was, was the size of the house. And it's a little hard, for me to see, but our floor area that we're proposing, our 4,600 square feet of habitable space on the 13,000 square foot lot is, roughly a 40% floor area, or an FAR, as it's sometimes referred to. The property owner, David Derniez, did some, very intensive investigation of, properties on Bluebird Canyon, both the 1,500 block and the 1,600 block, and found that the average floor area to lot size is right around 40%. And I can't really read it very well from this distance, but it's all in that document, and we can certainly pick through that a little bit more. We have a lot to cover. Next slide, please. Okay, what you'll see when we go into the design images, we're proposing a house which is essentially two pavilions. There's a single-story pavilion, and there's a two-story pavilion. The two-story pavilion is partially cut into the hill, and so it's partially subterranean. We have a garage tucked underneath the single-story pavilion. The houses that you see in yellow are houses that are 3 stories or more, and the subject site is shown in green. So as you can see, predominantly there are 3-story houses within the pattern of development. Next slide, please. Ooh, running out of time. This is really important. 70% of the buildable area on the property is above the top of the slope. The area in yellow is 70% of the buildable portion of the property. Not only is it the substantial buildable portion, but it's also where there's views and where we can integrate interior and exterior living, hence the ascending driveway that we're proposing. Next slide, please. Let's skip this one. This is other properties that have ascending driveways. Next slide, please. In my meetings with Susan Witten, we talked about looking at an alternate driveway location. And I can save that for the rebuttal if
Yeah,
you
Horst,
like.
you have 3 minutes on rebuttal, if you could
Sure,
save it. 'Cause
absolutely.
we got a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a
like
good
that.
place to start.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to the public comments, how many people intend to speak? If you could raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to keep it at 3 minutes, but I want to tell you, when the yellow light goes on, start wrapping up your comments. I am not going to allow to go beyond the red light. And it's really important to stay within that time period, so be concise. Also be aware, we've talked to many of you and have read the materials. So with that, if we get a lineup and start with the public comment, now's the time. Come up to the podium. Let's get going. Also, I'd appreciate it, you're not required to, but it's helpful for us if you could state your name and your property address at the beginning. I won't charge you time for that one. All right.
Got it. Everybody, Joe Cover. Good to see you guys again. 1536 Morningside. We have the undeveloped parcel that's adjacent to the north of the applicant's property. I'm going to keep my comments brief. I sent in a letter, and I think most of everything is probably going to be covered by everybody else. So I guess the only things I wanted to address real quick were, for us, view equity is actually not that big of a concern. I think, David, you mentioned that. The view equity that we were talking about were 3 trees that were in the project outline. African fern pines, when I looked them up, they can grow up to like 40 to 50 feet tall. I understand that there would be a limit that was capped on them, but still doesn't necessarily mean that they won't grow higher than that. And I think for where they are right now on the property, they're at a like 497, 496, and 493 foot of elevation, which at 12, 15, and 20 feet of height basically brings them up to about 510 feet, which is actually higher than, it's about level with the top of the current proposed structure, but it's actually higher than the first floor structure, which is kind of where we are looking to the west. That first floor structure kind of juts out a little bit north. And so I guess like what my thought was capping it so that really the trees just kind of go as high as whatever the ultimate height of the building goes, so that we're not really looking at trees that are bushy that are much higher than the proposed structure. I understand the need for privacy and the challenges on the hillside. And I'm fully, I'm fully in agreement with the need for privacy there. So finding a good solution, I think, is important to me. And then the only other thing is just reiterating, glazing is just, I think, the biggest thing for a lot of us. A lot of big windows in the house, and inclusive of on that north side that would kind of look into our yard and then back at our patio. So I understand there's some louvering there. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I guess if there's gonna be louvering, that kind of helps with that privacy concern. Having the louvers on the outside of the windows that kind of lead to a peekaboo view kind of going frontwards rather than towards the back, so that it continually gives them privacy inside theirs and us privacy on our side. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, good evening. I'm Eileen Slora. I live at 1545 Bluebird Canyon Drive, and it's sort of diagonal to the house. And I have a couple concerns with the proposed project. The first one's the elevation and location of the extensive floor-to-ceiling glass windows in the dining room, which projects towards Bluebird Canyon and also directly into my bedroom area. I did mention it to Horace. There's a tree that I know is being removed, so that definitely will be in my area. So I respectfully request that the design element be reviewed and revised to eliminate this invasive view line. The second concern is the spa and reflection pool. Again, the location of the spa. During the day, you hear birds singing. At night, you hear coyotes howling and you hear owls hooting, and it makes the area really, really special. And it's a refuge of calm and serenity, which is unique to Laguna Beach. My concern is the constant humming from the spa equipment and also the noise that people may be using it at all times during the day. And it will disrupt the tranquility of the surrounding neighbors. So I would hope it could be designed in a space to mitigate the perceived noise pollution. And then lastly, the structure is very visible as it sits on top of the knoll, and there are really very tall retaining walls at the street level, which weren't shown on the rendering. And I would just hope that these 12-foot walls aren't concrete and that they're designed to really enhance the area and flow with it. Thank you.
Next.
Susan Whiten, 1540 Bluebird. This project is hugely impactful, obviously, to me, but also to our entire neighborhood. I went back and looked at the land use element, and one of the things that we don't often talk about are the guiding principles. Principle number 7 seems to encapsulate perfectly the challenges of the site, and it provides clear guidelines for development of challenging sites such as this one. Principle 7 says, ensure development is responsive to individual site constraints. It says, quote, the general plan sets forth the philosophy that avoidance of negative impacts is preferred to mitigation of these impacts. It also says, quote, most development will involve building on difficult sites with multiple constraints. General plan policies set forth that planning, access, siting, and design choices should reflect a response to the particular challenges of a site. Projects should be compatible in design, scale, and character with the surrounding neighborhood and preserve views and privacy to the greatest extent feasible. Neighborhood had high hopes. We still have high hopes now that Mr. Dernier's hired Horace, that it would change some of the fundamentals of the project. But some of the fundamentals of the project have not changed. The house is still on the top of the knoll, and the floor plan is still oriented in a way that is against the municipal code, which is to say the public areas are specifically called out in the code: living room, kitchen, decks overlooking bedrooms of the adjacent house should not happen. And this is the exact relationship, and it's the same floor plan that was in the original design by the previous architect. The policies in the land use element regarding how to integrate the house into the hilly site have not been fulfilled. The municipal code standards about privacy and design articulation have been ignored. Multiple residential design guidelines have been disregarded. We do not dispute the right to build a house on this property. We are looking for a solution.
The solution to these problems is straightforward. Meet the standards of the land use element, the general plan policies and design guidelines, and take the direction of the design review board. An appropriate project would do the following. It would move the house off the ridge and terrace it into the topography. 2, it would substantially reduce the mass scale and size of the building. 3, it would relocate the driveway and relocate the garage to the street level. 4, it would revise the floor plan to relocate the family room, DR, et cetera. 5, it would substantially reduce the amount of picture windows. And 6, it would eliminate the retaining walls over 5 feet at the street level.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank
Next.
you.
Good evening, Mary Fagres, 1561 Morningside. I compliment the architect. Certainly the structure is better, but we still have major concerns with scale, mass, character, and placement of all the structures, including the driveway, the garage. Some of the materials are great, but it does not fit in our neighborhood. And this is too bad we didn't have a subdivision map in the beginning for the whole knoll. We're facing now this constant hearings. It's just wearing our neighborhood down. But now the way the structure is still coming back, perched up on the ridge, right at the crest, it's not only impacting Bluebird Canyon Drive, but it's also impacting Morningside Drive. I am going to look right up into bedrooms, and they are going to look down into our bedroom that faces Morningside Drive. The lights, the noise, it's not there yet. It needs more help. We realize that there is a right to develop the land, but we need to do it so it really does fit in our neighborhood. This is putting a lot of stress on our Upper Bluebird Canyon neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, I'm Marcia Stallworth for the Ramitas again, 1600 Bluebird Drive. They're unable to join us this evening. So I'm just relaying a few messages in their behalf. They still haven't received any notices of any of these hearings or meetings that you guys have been having, but hopefully the assessor has told me that there's good news in the future, and hopefully they'll be receiving some notifications. The Ramitas are very supportive of everybody being able to build a home, even if it's on the top of the knoll. They have expressed an interest in if there's something that they can do to lessen the negative impact on the neighborhood, they would like to know about it. They're willing to work with the city, the neighbors, possibly a shared driveway. They've even talked about grading. I know that truckloads of dirt being removed from the area has been very concerning to the neighbors. And they're not sure if this is something that's even feasible or not. So, but we're just putting it out there. If possible, if one of the neighbors can grade and push it up on the Ramita property for compaction, if that will help us alleviate some of the pain in the neighborhood, they would be open to talking to people about that and working something out. Whatever they can do to help the neighborhood, the neighbors, they are open to communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Next.
I'm Peter Groman. I live directly below the property side. I do agree, everybody has a right to build a home on their side. But everybody also has the obligation to conform to what the rules say. This house here, the proposed size is way, way larger than anything there. The Upper Bluebird Canyon, the 1500 block, they're small homes. This one here is a 4,600 and change massive property. The design might be great for a high-end area like Irvine Cove, but it's not, it's totally out of character for the Bluebird Canyon area. The ridgeline preservation is, again, the home is supposed to not be on a ridgeline. This one is now right on top, and it's definitely visible from both sides, Morningside as well as Bluebird Canyon. The export of 1,900 cubic yard of dirt on a road that is limited to 3 tons. And it's a cut and fill road. And it's very narrow, 18 feet wide at the property side. That is concern for problems. Whatever the approval is, because the road is small, there should be a requirement to have off-site staging for both, for the people, the workers, as well as for the material. Otherwise, access to my house, the postal deliveries, everybody there is severely restricted. And last item, while a larger size property might be financially of interest to the applicant, that doesn't mean it should be, approval should be granted just to make it financially easier for him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
William Horner, 1565 Bluebird. So I'm directly across the street from the proposed project. I echo a lot of the concerns of the neighbors. Also do want to recognize the hiring of Hortz, I think, was greatly appreciated. And I think it helped bring kind of the aesthetic a little bit more in line with kind of the canyon character. However, the fundamental issues really weren't addressed by the redesign, in my opinion. If you think about mass and scale, you think about access issues, privacy issues with the glazing, noise and potential slope issues with the spa, and the excavation. My sense is, I think the neighbors would get on board with something that was much more thoughtfully scaled and kind of context considerate. And I think there's still a pretty wide gap there. And so I'd love the board to explore basically some process ideas for how we might be able to narrow that gap. And essentially it's become a pretty poor use, I think, of the community's time and the board's time. And honestly, probably the applicant's time. So I'd love to get some kind of creative ideas on the table for how we might kind of cut through this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Design Review Board and city staff. My name's Pam Adams. I live up on Morningside Drive, probably the furthest one from all the other speakers, but I am opposed to the applicant's project, whether it's 1550 or 1560 Bluebird Canyon Drive. I guess it's called Lot A now. And I'm opposed to it for these reasons. The design sits on top of the ridgeline of the knoll instead of being nestled into the terrain. It exceeds neighborhood compatibility in its mass and scale with a smaller subdivided lot due to SB 9. Why the city approved that, I just still bothered by that. It is a sterile monolithic design and in direct contrast to the eclectic kind of bohemian homes in the existing neighborhood. Character-wise, it doesn't fit. The massive glazing and light intrusion will be a nuisance to the neighbors. I understand there's a spa or a pool that's going to be put on top of the ridge. Will also create increased noise pollution to the neighbors and across the canyon, both ways, Arch Beach Heights and also Rimrock. I hear there's 2 pools across from us on Morningside at Rimrock, and the noise is deafening. The lack of current infrastructure on Bluebird Canyon Drive is really inadequate, so the city needs to address that before any approval along that portion. I mean, there's no gutters, there's nothing. And like Mr. Groman had said earlier that the road is very, very narrow. I just don't even understand how they're going to be able to stage a project like this. Anyway, so deny this project, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Christy Miller. My husband and I I'm here to speak, and my husband and I have been friends with David and his family for years. They've been in the community for 25 years. I remember when they purchased the property, they were so excited to build their forever home in that wonderful neighborhood. And I know that for over a year, David has worked closely with the city, starting with the optional DMT concept review process, during which time it was determined where the best sitting for the home was determined. I know that David met with the neighbors many times, and he took their comments to heart, and so much so that he chose to delay the project, bring in a completely new architect, and redesign the property with their comments and concerns in mind. Given that the neighbors were aware of the redesign, I was a bit surprised when I was reading the multitude of letters that came in. And I do have to say, I've had to go through a project by our house that was being proposed, and it was a lot. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of change when you have something coming into your neighborhood and you've got dirt going, you've got all these concerns, and those make sense. But in terms of building the property comes in and it's code compliant, it's general plan compliant, it's Hilltop Bluff compliant, and it has no variation. So it meets all the criteria for approval this evening. But some of the concerns that I didn't understand is one of the neighbors seems to be leading the concern about not having the property developed home to be on the knoll, yet 70% of the lot is on the knoll. So where else would you put it, right? Then there's some considerations for the neighbor next door who seems to have a concern with the driveway. The proposed driveway here is 130 foot long, yet hers is 216 foot long, 23% run up to the hill on top, leads up to the house, which is 20 feet above the street. So this one is proposed to be even less than that. The right-of-way seems to be a concern for most neighbors, yet the street width seems to be a concern, yet most of the houses are built into the right-of-way that makes the street only 18 feet. This project would be required to make that, bring those 2 feet back to widen the street back to 20 feet. One of the neighbors, and I heard him say this, he's concerned about the size of the home. And I understand if you're going to compare that to your own home, when this lot is 2.5 times the size, you have to multiply that to get to the size of the house. At the end of the day, this is a legal buildable lot, code compliant, meets general plans, Hilltop guidelines requirements, no variances, criteria, again, to approve the application. Lastly, it is an SB9, and SB9 is a sensitive subject given that it's state requirements. And we want to make sure that we don't have any issues based on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? All right, Horst, you have 3-minute rebuttal.
Okay, well, that's a lot to address in 3 minutes, but what I would say is we are grateful to the neighbors. We've had great communication with them. They have excellent ideas. We might not agree on everything, but we have benefited from their comments. We've taken their comments to heart. We've made substantial changes to the project. In terms of siting, there's really, I think, 2 different ways of doing this project. One is what the majority of the neighbors want, and that is to put the house on the street level. Invariably, what you're going to get is you're going to get more excavation. You're probably going to get a 3-story house because you're going to have a garage probably in 2 levels above that. You're going to have a house that doesn't have any connectivity to the yard space. Once again, 70% of the buildable area of this site is on the top. This is not a ridge line. This particular site does not fit the definition of ridge line. We know we can't build on ridge lines, but the buildable portion of the site, 70%, is at the top. The people who developed Susan Whiten's property, 70, 80 years ago, they had the foresight to understand that there were 2 ways to develop that property. We're going to put a house on the street. We're not going to have any connection to garden space. A house on the street is going to have a lot of retaining walls on the uphill side. It's going to have dark rooms. It's an infeasible, way to develop, in my opinion, a property like this. We looked at the alternative driveway, locations with Susan. But if we bring the driveway up the other direction, we're starting at an elevation on Bluebird, which is 6 feet lower than the high end, where we're starting. So consequently, we get a much longer driveway. And then we're going up to the higher portion of the site. So we end up having 15-foot retaining walls in our auto court. So we looked at it with an open mind. It doesn't make any sense. I don't even know why we're really even talking about putting a house on the street level. It is not only infeasible, but it's just not good design. And then you have the entire buildable portion of your property behind you, and the whole tenet of building a house, a modern house in California, is the integration of the interior and the exterior spaces. You don't have that if you put the house on the street. Susan enjoys, and I love her house, and I love the integration of the garden, with the living space. And we're just asking, for the same, rights and privileges. If we're too big, we can reduce this house. But, I think it's a good project. It's an honor to be working in Bluebird Canyon. Bluebird Canyon is where Lamont Langworthy, William lives in Lamont Langworthy house. We tried to make this building light on the hill using rustic materials, elegance through simplicity, 2 intersecting volumes. It's single story next to Susan's house. There's a lot of stuff going on here that we haven't even touched on this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Forrest. I appreciate everybody staying reasonably within the time periods. We will now have board questions. Do you have any?
I've got a couple. Forrest, with redesigning, were there any parameters that weren't allowed to be changed when you were coming up with concepts for reimagining the site?
Yeah, when I committed to taking on the project, I agreed with the owner that the ascending driveway up the hill, was non-negotiable. I talked to David about maybe turning the driveway around so that it could be shared with the adjacent property that David owns, and that maybe we would have one driveway, less retaining walls. But and we study that with an open mind. And I have drawings. I can, if you'd like, I can open up that exhibit. So yeah, that was one of the things that we agreed to. But other than that, David gave us, free rein to create, a work of art and architecture that would reflect the, character of Bluebird Canyon, and that would, be, the best use of the property in terms of, views and, integrating, interior and exterior living, the best use of the property. One of the things about the driveway going, toward Susan's property is when you get to the top, that's the lower area of the site, and there's a retaining wall at the auto court. So that retaining wall would help to mitigate, headlights onto Susan's property, and help to create some separation.
One more question about the grading associated with the site. About how much of it's associated with the driveway? Obviously, it's 1,900 or change in cubic yards grading. Do you have that with what's associated with the driveway?
Yeah, I would say
percentage?
that's a great question. Like I was saying earlier, I don't know, can we go back to the images? I won't spend too much time, on them, but they're the image that shows the two different pavilions. I don't know if that's possible, Sarah. Maybe back just a little bit further. The only area where we're grading, for the house itself is underneath the 2-story pavilion. And that's probably just a couple hundred square feet of grading. We did some preliminary calculations, Louis, because you mentioned, this is a good one to look at right here. We did some preliminary calculations. If we were to put the garage at the street level, the right-of-way, the distance from the edge of the street to the front property line on average is about 13 feet. The garage would require a 5-foot setback. So already the doors of the garage would be 18 feet away from the edge of the existing street on average. And then a 20 or 22-foot garage, the retaining wall for the garage would be close to, the back retaining wall at street level would be close to 30 feet. There's actually, Steve just passed me a note that the driveway is 600 cubic yards. He's so much better at answering these questions than I am.
I guess We'll
A
get to it
garage
on-
on street level would require more more excavation.
We'll get to it on C3 later with staff. Thank you.
All right, Horst, I have a couple.
Sure.
You're excavating a 1,000-square-foot subterranean garage? Am I misreading that?
The garage is subterranean. On average, the garage is probably 8 to 10 feet below grade. So,
No, square footage of the garage.
oh, the square footage, it's a 3-car garage. So it's roughly 600 square feet. I can get the
The
exact.
staff
number.
report said 1,000 square feet. Is that wrong?
I think that's probably off.
The plans show 1,000? Okay, how much of the excavation cubic yards is associated with digging out the subterranean garage? Or do you know?
Well, so Steve just passed me a note that said the driveway itself is 600 cubic yards. The area underneath the bedroom wing is probably a couple of hundred cubic yards. So the garage itself up there, I would say maybe 500 cubic yards. I
Okay.
don't think our civil engineers really broke it down like that, but
Okay, the other question I had is you're putting retaining walls into the public right-of-way, the encroachment area?
yeah, can I?
You haven't heard my question yet.
Sorry, I had a image on that we haven't.
Yeah, why
looked
don't you
at.
put up that image
Yeah.
and tell me the location and how high they are?
Okay, it's a little bit further, Sarah, into the deck there. It's so I love the way Susan's driveway works because there's very little retaining on the uphill side. The neighbors were concerned about the look. A little bit further back, a little bit further in, a couple more slides maybe. So rather than a couple more, please. Should be coming up in just a sec. Maybe a couple more. Might be the next one. One more, please. One more. Okay, it is the next one after this. Oh, one more, sorry. Boy, one more. Forward.
the location.
No, this is back. Oh, okay, so we're going backward. It's toward the end of the presentation. It's a picture of the retaining wall system. So,
do you
there
know-
it is, right there. So rather than using concrete, for the uphill cut, for the driveway, this is a crib wall system which was used at Heisler Park. I love this because it's interlocking concrete bars. You lay it back at a slight angle, and within those open webs, plants can grow. And the site, as you've seen, is very steep in the front. So eventually, as the plants grow over the concrete bars, this retaining wall, and you can see it in the lower portion of the.
Again, my question was the height of it and the location.
I'm so sorry. 8 feet is 8 feet is the highest.
Within the public right-of-way there, that you're seeking the encroachment?
There is no cut in there is no retaining wall other than the parking structure or the off-street parking space, and that's about a 10-foot retaining wall.
For the off-street parking
For the
space only?
off-street.
So there's no retaining wall? that's
No,
the
it's just,
subject of
it's,
That's the subject of the revocable encroachment permit, except to make the public parking space?
that's correct.
Bill, I just want to make sure that that's correct.
It actually looks like there's a very low retaining wall, maybe just upwards of a foot or so. right
And
at
just
the-
one tail end of the?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but most of it is the larger retaining wall to
The
support.
project
public
has been
parking.
approved for the revocable encroachment permit from Public Works.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know that. All right, I don't have any further questions.
I have a question. Is the pool and spa location, is that in the side yard?
Thank you for asking that question. That is actually, it is a side yard. With the previous design, that spa was right up against the property line with Susan's house, Susan Whiten's house. What we did here, thank you for that, Sarah. This is the correct image. We pulled the spa back into kind of like a tree well area so that the spa is kind of enveloped by the house on three sides. We thought that would be a much more neighborhood, sort of neighbor sensitive location for the spa. It used to be right on the property line.
Okay, and so just to clarify, your plans do show a garage with 1,027.16 square feet. Are you saying that's incorrect?
No, whatever our plans say is correct. I just haven't opened them, but most likely what we're including then is the staircase that goes from the garage up to the house, because it is a 3-car garage, which is typically 600 square feet. So I was just kind of shooting from the hip on that one.
On that same garage, it's less common for new builds to incorporate a tandem garage, especially on ones that are 12,000 plus square feet lots. So what was the direction for that?
Well, we just, honestly, we sort of inherited that from the previous design. I didn't see any issue with it because what it was doing is it was pushing that tandem space, completely subterranean. So when you look at the garage doors, you're just seeing a 2-car garage door as opposed to a 3-car garage door. So I just accepted that as maybe the best way to proceed. But we're certainly open on that. I mean, we could do a 3-car, 3-car garage very easily. We just have to extend the auto court. You can see it here in the image. The garage door is underneath the body of water there. It's that darker material.
All right. Louis? Any other questions? All righty, I will close the public hearing and I'm going to begin the comments. So first off, so everybody's clear, the job of the Design Review Board is to fairly evaluate and approve projects that meet the guidelines and the other requirements. That's our job. We don't take sides. We don't have bias. Second thing I want to make clear is that we are an independent body, a citizen body. Staff reports and recommendations are informational only for us. So are letters from the applicant and letters from the neighbors. We independently do our own fact-finding and we make our own decisions. So any misconceptions out there, and I think there are, that we're unduly influenced is just mistaken. It misunderstands each one of us on the board, our experience, how we read staff reports, the fact that we go out and look. Horst, I talked to you for a long time. Neighbors, I talked to each of you that I spoke to who asked to meet. There is no undue bias. The fact that Susan Witten's on Planning Commission has no impact on any board member. She is entitled to level her complaints, to ask for a site inspection, just like the applicant is, just like any other neighbor is. So just get rid of those misconceptions because I'll be blatant, they're false, and I don't want to hear them. With respect to this project, it's an SB 9 lot split. The board is well aware of that. It's a large project at 4,644 square feet, plus 1,000 square foot subterranean garage that goes well into the slope. It is a large mass, and there's lots of glazing, and importantly, as my comments will talk about, there's a significant amount of excavation at over 1,900 cubic yards. So this project raises lots of issues and complications and does have impacts on 3 sides. It has impacts on Upper Bluebird, on Sue Witten's property, and because it's at the top of the knoll on Morningside. It's a project that should be planned carefully with input and consideration of impacts to neighbors and the community as a whole. And I'm glad Horst is on it because that's been certainly my experience with Horst. Sometimes it takes a second hearing to really understand it. And I'll go on to this comment. It's, in my opinion, it's going to need another hearing. I cannot approve the project as is tonight. So I'm going to go through what I think are the important guidelines and issues relating to the coastal development permit, and there's issues concerning CEQA in this case. Access. I am torn over this long driveway and the feasibility of putting the garage at the street level. I'm not 100% convinced you can't, but if I was to lean one way based upon the evidence, that the only way to really do this project is through a driveway that goes up, not a street level driveway. I'm going to talk about this project in conjunction with Mr. Durnay's other project and whether both projects having their own driveways make sense given the tightness of the neighborhood. And that's going to relate to my CEQA analysis when I get there. Design articulation, the guideline reads in pertinent part that the building envelope and the appearance of the building and retaining wall mass should be minimized. And that includes by terracing and reducing the size of elements of the project. In my opinion, it does not meet that guideline, primarily for the reason that it's just too massive. And I appreciate Horace's comment that you're willing to reduce it. And as I go through my comments, I'll tell you, kind of my thoughts on that and the importance, not just of the guidelines, but also of the coastal development permit requirements. General plan compliance with the land use element, which is also part of the coastal development permit. So that impacts, as attorneys here may know, SB 9 compliance. Land use element 2.1 I'm concerned about. Maintain the diversity and uniqueness of individual neighborhoods. Guidelines shall minimize the scale and bulk of new construction and requirement development to be compatible with surrounding residences. Again, I think the mass and scale, and I know that neighborhood, we've driven it. I've driven it for the Morningside projects and for Mr. Durnay's prior project. It truly is the largest house I've seen in that neighborhood. Mass and scale of it towering. I understand that the buildable area is at the top of the ridge, but you put a 4,000 plus square foot home there, it's going to be huge. And it's going to be seen by everybody. And I think you've done some very creative elements down below to make it look like a two-story. I think that does some good, maybe not totally, but you put a massive house on top of that ridge. I want to challenge you to do some terracing there, to bring in some design articulation and land use element policy 2.1 to make it work. I know you can do that. I don't believe terracing is impossible, at least for some of the components of your project. Lighting and glare, way too much glazing. And that's going to also come down later when I talk about privacy. So I'll go to that. Neighborhood compatibility. We're setting the neighborhood compatibility on the Bluebird side with your project, which for the prior two projects on Morningside set that neighborhood standard. It's really important that the standard be set appropriately consistent with the guidelines. I recognize it's going to be a bigger house. It's a bigger lot. But I think you've got to reduce the size, bring it into more of a terrace design articulated to make me, at least me, feel comfortable that the compatibility is being set in the appropriate way, which is going to guide the other, I believe, 2 more homes or 3 more homes on that side of Bluebird Canyon. I think it's a good start. I don't have a problem with modern. No, I would never own one. But you do awesome modern. I've always told you that. And I think that is neighborhood compatible given the eclectic nature of this town filled with modern everywhere. Not alone, but mixed in. And I think it would be an appropriate addition. Privacy. I think what I want to hear, those louvers are here and there. I'm very concerned about the privacy, particularly from the bottom floor level to the Witten property. It's right up against the, very near the property line. There's glazing everywhere. I'm also concerned about glazing at night. I'm probably most concerned because I think you've done some good louvering on the Morningside side of it, but not so much on the Bluebird Canyon side and the Susan Witten side. If I was to look at neighborhood compatibility, the amount of your glazing is just way too much. So that would need to be produced when you come back. Revocable encroachment permit. My only concern is the retaining wall in the encroachment area. However, if it's just to add public parking on that street, which is seriously needed, I think I can make the findings on that. I'm interested what other board members have to say about the REP. Coastal development permit. This is really important for you and your client to understand. There's 5 under finding 1, which reads, the project is in conformity with all applicable provisions of the Certified Local Coastal Program, including the following criteria. And it lists several criteria. I think 3 are in direct play here. Criteria 5 reads, the proposed development will minimize the alterations of natural landforms and will not result in undue risk from geological and erosional forces and or floods and fire hazards. With the size and location of the structure and 1,900 cubic yards of export, including for a large subterranean garage, in fact, it's tandem. So you're really digging in there. I'd be surprised if it was only 600 cubic yards, but I leave that to you. You cannot say that this project as proposed minimizes the alterations of natural landforms. More importantly, I'm very concerned that the removal of that export, including the truck size and trips necessary, will result in an undue risk from geological and erosional forces on the narrow Bluebird Road. I talked to you about that. The road looks in pretty bad shape. It has really bad drainage. Who knows? It's a cut-fill road. Who knows what the shape of that is? And if those trucks start running, it could jeopardize the stability of the houses below. I have read, not every page, the geological report that you provided. I'm not sure it's fully current because it was done under prior homes. But one thing is very clear from the report as I read it, is that it did not do any testing or investigation of the road. Because there is a risk to that road, in my opinion, from the removal of that amount of excavation, and particularly since there are road signs all around Bluebird Canyon limiting the trucks to 3 tons. I am very concerned without more study and a proposal as to how the condition of that road and its suitability for that kind of excavation removal can be done. I can't in good conscience make finding 5. I don't think it's hard to do. It's to get some borings out there, come up with a plan of action to figure out how you're going to remove how many trucks and so forth. And when I get to the CEQA analysis, I think I'm going to strongly recommend that you think about combining Mr. Durnay's 2 projects to talk about compliance with finding 5 and what I'm going to talk about with respect to CEQA. So we have a building plan that deals with the excavation and removal of both projects in a sequenced, organized basis, so that it eliminates or deals with the risks that are described in criteria number 5. Next, criteria number 6. The proposed development will be visually compatible with the character of surrounding areas and where feasible will restore and enhance visual quality in visually degraded areas. As it presently stands, for the reasons I've described for mass and scale, apply 100% to this criteria. So I could not in good conscience make that finding on the present project, but I know you're going to be able to come up with one that I can. And it's important that we do that because a coastal development permit is required. Lastly, criteria number 8, the proposed development will provide with an adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities. That finding relates directly to what I've asked you to do on criteria 5 on dealing with Bluebird Canyon, including that the drainage, that that the access road will be adequate. Also relating to the finding of the coastal development permit, on this project, I'm also going to ask you to do a staging plan. And the reason is because that road's so narrow. The unusual circumstances here, it's also going to relate to CEQA, which I'll get to in a second. The unusual circumstances here of such a narrow road and with such a vast amount of excavation and the lack of parking, I think it's important to have a well-thought-out plan so that we can make the findings of criteria 5 and criteria 6. Lastly, and I know I've gone on a little longer, but it's important, this project's complicated and I spent a lot of time on it. I know other board members have as well. All right, so the categorical exemption is what we apply. There needs to be certain things that need to be established for me to make a categorical exemption here. The exemption being requested is 15303, which is the appropriate one. Section 15300.2 deals with exceptions to the Class 3 categorical exemption, which is found in 15303. And there's 2 exceptions, both of which I think are applicable here potentially. Exception C reads, it basically deals with significant effects. A categorical exemption shall not be used for an activity where there is a reasonable possibility that the activity will have a significant effect on the environment due to unusual circumstances. I am very concerned about whether there's a significant effect from the excavation and the trucks on Bluebird Canyon. Alleviate that concern, I will gladly say that that exception no longer applies. The last one is the more complicated one. Cumulative impacts. All exemptions for these classes are inapplicable when the cumulative impact of successive projects of the same type in the same place over time is significant. Mr. Derniez has successive projects here. You know, I haven't made a final decision on it, but I tell you, I'm very tempted to. I'm interested how the other board members feel about this. I think that the cumulative impacts, particularly with the excavation for the 2 projects, kind of call for them to be considered at the same time for purposes of evaluating whether the categorical exemption applies. In other words, we are able to consider cumulative impacts in making that determination. I am not sure that I can make that determination based solely on this project without considering Mr. Derniez's second project. Okay, so those are my comments, but I don't want to lose the forest through the trees. And this is to you, Mr. Derniez. There is definitely a buildable house there. I wasn't convinced of that earlier. I am more convinced now. It needs to be reduced in size and, you know, maybe materially. I'm not using the word significantly. It needs some terracing and it needs to deal with that road. All right, those are my comments. Thanks for your patience.
So I'll go second. The comments that you just last said, I agree with pretty much everything that you said, but the last comment about how the 2 projects need to be reviewed at the same time, I would say that all those projects, all those lots, including the one that was just recently reviewed, should be required to be reviewed at the same time. If you're going to ask him to review the projects at the same time, they should all be reviewed.
Yeah, the problem is I don't think we have the authority to do that. I think with Mr. Derniez having the 2 projects, we can combine them. There has been some discussion with, you know, at least some information provided to the city and the city council, and they haven't moved on that. So we're left with what we have.
Yeah, we'll leave that to the attorneys. So I'm just going to read what I have here. So yes, I concur with all of, or most of what Chair had commented. So for access, let me get that. Bless you. Local agencies can no longer deny SB 9 projects that may only be denied based solely on specific adverse impacts to the public health and safety with substantial objective evidence. I'd say that there is substantial evidence to allow a driveway and garage as proposed for access. Otherwise, someone would have to back out of their driveway if the driveway was at the street, like how the development in Diamond Crestview, a lot of that development, those houses, the way that they build into the hillside. Also, that street is very narrow, and it's also a blind, there's multiple blind curves. So it would be the public safety in mind. So with public safety in mind, the driveway should go the other direction. So not as proposed, but I do believe that to go opposite of where it is proposed, so that access can be achieved smoothly with ease rather than with the necessity of a hairpin U-turn or worse, a three-point turn, arriving and departing. For neighborhood compatibility, it goes along with access or complements access. I find the proposed driveway, but switch to go in the reverse direction to be neighborhood compatible as multiple driveways exist in the immediate area, including the adjacent neighbor, Mrs. Witten's. The maximum lot coverage is 35%. The maximum lot coverage is 35%. The proposed lot coverage is well below the maximum at 29.92. The minimum landscape open space is 31.4%. Proposed is well above the minimum, which is 35.26%. And the articulation and design integrity, they kind of go hand in hand. The home is well articulated, but it creates massive privacy issues. The design looks directly across another property. Your choice of materials are compatible with all of Laguna, but especially with Bluebird. The wood accents are methodically dispersed, which helps reduce the massing. Privacy, I'd say flip the script so that the bedrooms are on the first floor. This will align with Mrs. Witten's bedrooms, so you have bedrooms to bedrooms. Minimize the windows on that lower level that's facing across Mrs. Witten's. The floor to ceiling, wall to wall glazing, that's your signature style, and it's a beautiful architectural style. It's just not going to fit in this location. Because the second floor is well articulated from Mrs. Witten's, it just looks like a pop-up. Maybe that's where you can add the primary living space, the kitchen, the primary living space. For lighting, part of Bluebird's beauty is the dark sky at night, bright moon cycles, and stars. I recommend minimum lighting by code. And then for view equity, the properties with potential view impacts have yet to be built, so we can't determine the impacts for them. With the condition of approval to cap the height limits of the trees, the landscape, view equity could be achieved. I have to take a look at that later. And for the spa, I don't support a pool or spa feature located in a side yard, so that will have to be relocated. And for environmental context, it reads, oops, sorry. God dang it. The existing terrain should be utilized and the design and grading should be minimized. So if building the garage at the street would be detrimental to the environment, I'd like for you to come back and show us the difference between grading with the garage being built off the street and with the proposed garage in the driveway. And that's all my comments for now. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. Thanks to Board Member Gibbs and Gannon for doing the heavy lifting there. I just will kind of reiterate a couple things and just give some points of view. First, I think the design is lovely, as you often do. Not disappointed in that. As far as neighborhood compatibility, yeah, it doesn't quite fit the neighborhood compatibility as far as what's there now, but as Laguna evolves and as these houses get bought and sold, this is going to start to transition into more contemporary, I think, homes. And I think that we're different here and we have variety, and that's one of the things that makes us cool. So I think that that's manageable from a design perspective. I think what's making this not fit is mass and scale. And that obviously has been repetitive here. If you like took this thing and like took the plug out of one end and let it kind of took some of the air out of it, I think you'd be in a real sweet spot and still have a stunning home with plenty of places to grow and enjoy. So mass, and we don't want to set a precedent for the future as this knoll gets built up and as this hillside starts to get flipped over. I do agree with Mr. Board Member Gibbs that I do think that each lot ownership should be looked at as a whole, because what happens a lot here is, they'll say, oh, well, you did it, you approved it over there. It's like, and now it worked there. So it just can get us in a little bit of a pickle, and everything is not apples to apples. So I think if you look at them as a whole, there could be opportunities and maybe actually ones that would benefit everybody. So that's something we can discuss. I don't know how that gets looked at from a city perspective. I think you had mentioned that the lot coverage, you said that 70% area is buildable. And so that's where mass and scale comes in, right? You can't build it, but it's there. So you kind of call it yours, but it's like, so you just can't have both, so that's where you have to come down. You can't just claim that it's only 70% buildable and then claim all that other land as size for scale, for mass. Also, the smaller your house, it allows for more integration to the outdoors, which would be nice to be able to utilize. Michael, why do I not remember you? You're so adorable and I don't remember you. Sorry. His beautiful landscaping skills. Lighting and glare, as mentioned, don't want this to be Skyline Drive, which when I go up there, sometimes I'm just aghast at the amount of, I call them spaceships sitting up there. Love your glass. And I don't know if there's some new materials, we could put a man on the moon. You think we could figure a way to allow the light to provide the homeowner what they want by day, and at night, keep it from looking like a spaceship on the hill. So maybe there's something there where you don't have to lose your glass, but you can at least not let it be a glow through the night. I don't know. I don't know what the build opportunities are there. Landscape, we can look at that as we move forward. The rules on keeping it low, talk to your neighbors as you've done. And I think that's really helpful. Find out, especially as Mr. Cover mentioned, what's going on between his land, Susan, and her home, what's going to keep them feeling like they have what they need and you have what you need. And we're not impeding in sight lines for the home, but for their opportunity to get view. But you also provide the privacy, but not overgrown. I think privacy, as mentioned, is a concern from the amount of windows and the placement of the house right now. If it is all scaled back and perhaps you do the switcheroo of the sleeping rooms and the ceremonial rooms, maybe some of that can be mitigated there. But view equity, I don't feel like there's any view equity issue with anybody right now. So that's one of the few times that doesn't come into play. Staging, as they both pointed out, yes, that's going to be essential. I don't know what our jurisdiction is there, but it would be great to come up with something, because there's a lot, as Tom eloquently pointed out, there's a lot of impact on this hillside. And by doing that, you put a lot of the neighborhood at risk, all of the public. So I think that has to be really drilled down, but we're a ways from that. I think but that's something to keep into consideration as you design this. I don't know if I talked about the driveway specifically. I'm confused, to be honest with you, about this driveway. I don't know why they would go that way and why you'd want that curve and everything just from in and out, and accessibility, tandem garage and a lot this size and a home this size. That I just can't get behind that. So that has to be sort of adjusted. This is another opportunity to look at potentially looking at your other property. And as I believe the representative for the other homeowner's property there talked about, maybe we can come up with something that doesn't attack the hillside, provides everybody access and kind of their own opportunity to create their own environment, but doesn't attack the hillside. It's probably heavy lifting, but these are beautiful homes. This is an expensive property, and it's a neighborhood that needs to be considered. So I think that taking the time to look at that and maybe finding some solutions there might be a great opportunity with this driveway, because it just doesn't make sense where it is. I don't know if it's an access issue or a public safety issue, but something feels wrong about it, so I'd like, and definitely not the tandem. Let's see. Oh, and then when you reference like Susan's driveway being large, her retaining walls are all very low. This was built way back in the day, and I don't think anybody knew these knolls were going to be SB9'd, and you just really can't really use that as a calling card. But I don't have a problem with you making your way to capture the view and the opportunity there. It just has to be, mitigated, the amount of impact into that hillside. I think that's it for now. I think you've got plenty to go on. I just kind of reiterated my words, kind of how I felt about it, and just wanted to thank you, all of you guys, for reaching out to the neighbors again. That was really helpful. And I feel like they've been through a lot. This is a lot to go through in a neighborhood. And it's going to keep going because there's more to build. So I think you guys in this particular lot are really going to set the tone for where it all falls from here. Albeit it would have been great if the city had found a different way on this. I don't know how that plays out. I'm just not that knowledgeable of city business, but I do think it's respectful and incumbent upon us to try to make an effort here to set a tone.
Mr. Weil?
Yeah, thank you, board members and Chair. In general, I support the comments from my colleagues, especially Chair Gibbs, when it comes to the CDP and the general plan comments. In the CDP, I wanted to add that the utilities, it's also confusing right now that it's very clear that the utilities are being potentially relocated, or those kind of things are going on right now at the same time. I'd like the city to kind of look into that with Edison or SDG&E, whichever one's up there, to just make sure that it works in conjunction with the potential developments and doesn't, their relocation doesn't impact the design or outcome as we haven't gotten there yet. So that's also of concern. For me, I'm not supportive of the project as it's proposed. I think, Horst, you've done some elements that have really articulated this, and it's a clever design, except for me at a high level, it doesn't work on this site for a couple of reasons, and I'll get into it. Access is the one that's really driving the starting point, and it's hard that with the way the access was proposed to imagine the rest of the site when that's what needs the most work. If you look at chapter 11.16, locate garages, driveways in a manner compatible with the established neighborhood pattern. I think it's a little unfair to be characterizing other examples within this neighborhood that were non-compatible. When you're using the neighbor's site, that property was built in the 40s. The road wasn't even fully built or developed then. This was kind of a main access feature for that home at the time. And to say what they did in the 40s, 40 years before design review came about, is what you're using as the guide to create your design feature for access, it's a bad comparable for me. And the few examples that were shown really don't highlight the majority of the neighborhood, because if you look at Starlight or other parts of Bluebird Canyon, they're much more conforming, where they're more comparable in scale to the street for the access feature for the uphill ones. For the downhill properties, same thing. They're close to the street. There's narrow setbacks or abbreviated setbacks. The garages are close. And in this case, the road's not fully developed in front of these locations. 11.17, design garages to preserve the existing scale and neighborhood. Same thing. It doesn't fit for me. As I made other notes for the access, I appreciated the staff report and doing the comparisons to some of the other approvals. One of the things that was really, I went back and looked at some of the plans, the elevation change for your site is somewhere between 14 feet for the entrance of the driveway to the finished floor to almost 20 feet. The neighboring property, which is also the applicant's, had an 18-foot rise from the street level of entrance. The ones that we did approve from this body had a 2 and a 4-foot rise to finished grade, maybe give or take a few more feet, given that the slope of Morningside's a little steeper at various points in the lot. So for me, that's not compatible or comparable to what we've already discussed within this proximity in recent developments. For access, I also wanted to iterate that the 127 feet was too long. The proposed access conflicts with Chapter 6 of the environmental context, 6.1 and 6.3 for the proposed building is on or excessive. The driveway is creating a pop-up in the design that makes the property or the development or the design exceed the knoll. Whereas when we were looking at the Morningside projects and those were approved, those properties didn't exceed the highest points on those lots by maybe a foot from the roof line. And so I'd like to see that same scale brought into this project. Doesn't mean you can't build in that buildable area of the lot. I'm just saying it needs to be compressed down to be in comparable space to where we approve the other ones. It's also not compliant with 4.16, locate the garage to minimize perceived mass due to the height off the street grade. Design articulation, the tandem parking is subject to design review, and due to the size of the lot, as I commented earlier, I don't find it consistent or necessary for this size of property. And it doesn't necessarily make the access feature for that third car very feasible. It's just creating more mechanical space and uninhabitable room in the lot. I would encourage shared access with the neighboring, as mentioned by Board Member Gibbs, to review these two sites together because there are features that are being shared. Fire access features, the right-of-way improvements are being considered together as it's improving the street. So I think there's a nexus to see them side by side. We have precedent of doing that for other properties recently. If we looked at Old Bluebird a few years ago, sites 21572 and 21552, Treetop Lanes, we did the same thing with those sites and new developments for those lots as those were full teardowns and rebuilds for that neighborhood. The REP, it's a concern for the Bluebird Canyon because I went up there with a measuring tape and at the narrowest I measured 16 feet. Whereas not far around the corner, just past the ficus tree, on the more properly developed Bluebird Canyon Road, it's curb to curb, and that's a 24-foot road. So I need to see the right-of-way reach a much better depth than where we're at right now for access for not only the safety of the fire, but for the utilities and all the other features that really need to be preserved in making this a safer neighborhood in considering this project. The retaining walls, there are structural retaining walls that potentially are between 1 and 3 to 5 feet that do exceed into the right-of-way. I consider those permanent structures, and those really should be pulled back closer to the property line, as we've done that in other applications, because it would limit the future development and fire access or something for that site if that road was to be further developed. Environmental context, I concur with the staff report that the grading could be beneficial to lower in the site. For grading, it's a balance. I mean, I think mass and scale, view, and privacy are all considerations when we consider heavier grading on sites. I think this is much more of a similar stance to what we do in Diamond Crestview. I know you've developed some properties up there, and I not necessarily want to shove the whole house into the hillside, but I do think given the nature and topography of the lot, there is some elements that do need to be pushed into the hillside more carefully to provide more environmental context for the area and shape. The setback pattern, most homes are close to the street, as I mentioned earlier. The criteria is not, I didn't see the criteria met for 11.10, 11.16, 11.17, I already touched on those. The general plan compliance, I saw staff highlighted a few examples. I would take issues with those as well. And I do think, as mentioned by other board members, there's potentially further compliance issues that might need to be evaluated. View, as I was talking about the view, I didn't really see too much of a view issue, but I do think it needs to be comparable to the other lots. As I mentioned, the heights of those ones incomparable to those lots. I think that needs to be considered in this one. Privacy, there's potentially some privacy concerns with the downhill lot, which is Miss Witten's, and then the Cover lot, which is approved for design with that could create some privacy if we don't carefully design those louvers or lower the property or lower the design as well. Lighting and glare, as mentioned, I think we need to reference the project at 1000 Flamingo. I think that's the address. It was one on the other side of Bluebird Canyon. Pretty large home. I want to say it was closer to 8,000 square feet. But we did work out where they did have some expansive windows, but they used much more significant glass for tempering that down. And I think if you're trying to do within this modern design, you really need to propose what that glass type is to also help limit that glare. The design of the pools, which is touched by Ms. Gannon, the side yard is not appropriate location for this. There's plenty of room on this site to incorporate it where it's a much more private component. And I touched on those other things. So for me, this project needs a lot more work and a lot more careful consideration. I do agree with Board Member Gibbs and the other board members that this is a buildable site. A home will go here. We just need to work more as a community and as an applicant team and as a board to find that right fit. And that right home is in the reach of the developer. And I think we can find that balance because that's what design review is supposed to create, is the balance for the development and for the impacts. And I think we can achieve it.
Thank you, Mr. Wild. I'm going to make some comments and then I'm going to throw it back to the board members for any additional comments or comments on my comments. Because of the number of items that were raised, it's difficult to say, specifically what the consensuses are, except to say I think there's pretty broad scale consensus to the key issues with this project, which I'll describe. I'll start with access. Access is a real problem. I mean, I had it with the prior, project next door. Having this driveway go up, essentially 17 feet or however high it is, just creates mass and scale. Also, it's a very difficult thing. The far preferential thing would be to have a garage at the street level. I join with Board Member Gannon's comments upon that, which I also heard similar comments from other board members if that can be done. Second, as a fallback, and I don't know whether it can be done. It's, I kind of indicated maybe it can't. I don't know, but I think that needs to be explored. Secondly, to the extent that changing the driveway as proposed by Board Member Gannon enables a joint driveway situation with the adjoining property, that should be explored because you're going to have the cumulative impacts issue anyway. Also, I think the tandem garage, I failed to mention this, the additional excavation to do that just puts more burden on the street, creating, the problems, not only under the guidelines, but the coastal development permit and CEQA. So work on that. Mass and scale, every board member had a problem with it. Your design's cool, but it needs to be, I said materially, not a ham sandwich. And I think, particularly at the upper level and the expanse, I think you kind of have two homes. You have a single level, what did you call it, a platform or a pavilion? And I love your pavilions. I've seen some awesome pavilions. But better integrating those and, thinking about where mass and scale shows the most, and that's certainly on the Bluebird Canyon side. Then you have privacy, light, and glare and glazing, which are all in one bundle. I know you're going to be able to work magic with that. The spa definitely can't stay. You've got two board members, and I would join them in considering what they had to say on the spa issue. So I think you have quite a bit of work to do. I think, particularly given the city council's view that we should be going to 2 hearings and we need to make the findings on 3, I'm going to encourage you, Horst, to do 2 things. Make material changes to accommodate our concerns. And secondly, communicate on privacy issues and light and glare issues with the most affected neighbors, the very reasonable people, Susan, who you know, and the other people who spoke that are directly below this on Bluebird Canyon, and then I think the Morningside Drive property, 1536, I believe it is. So those are your challenges. I think you can meet them, but let's make some real progress so we don't need a third meeting, or if we do, it's very minor. Any comments from board members? Okay, so let's talk about a continuation. First of all, how much time do you think you need to do all of this?
2 months to submittal.
2 months to submittal, so
Yeah.
where does that put us? Who's scheduling? Is it, Sarah, are you doing that, or James?
Excuse me.
Also,
Pulling up the schedule
real
now.
quick, seriously think about putting both projects together, because I am probably, I mean, by my own sake, and we're not making a final decision, but the cumulative effects of the environmental concerns here are going to very likely be necessary to make the determination that the categorical exemption applies for the reasons I've described. If you guys disagree at the second round, please put that in writing, and I'll absolutely, I haven't made a final decision, but I would consider it. Go ahead.
In looking at the calendar that we've kind of established,
Submittal.
I understand that. I'm trying to accommodate, today's the 8th.
No, no, not for hearing. He wants submittal to be in 2 months, so it'd be a hearing later than that. September, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let me look at that. I apologize.
In
August. In August, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just so you know, I may be out of town in August. Oh, you can't?
It would be August 14th.
I'm not for sure. Anyway,
Well, it can be scheduled and then,
all right. I don't have any present plans, so I definitely want to be at this hearing, so.
Yeah, I think August 14th would be the hearing date that we'd shoot for.
Okay, I think that should work out. We were going to be leaving.
and what is the
up to
submittal
Memorial.
date?
In reading this, it says June 25th.
Is that enough time?
Okay, so August 14th, do I have a motion to continue this to August 14th?
I'll second that.
Well, no, you got
Here,
to.
I'll move item number 5.3 for continued to August 14th with the board direction.
And I'll second that.
Board Member
No, no.
Coveney,
Yes.
Board Member Weil,
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Gannon, and Chair
Oh.
Gibbs.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so I do not believe there's any other business on the agenda. So we are going to adjourn to, when's the next hearing date? Does anyone know? I don't have my,
May 22nd.
Yeah,
May-
May 22nd.
we're adjourned to May 22nd at 5 PM.